Now, what I did was I took a simple climate model, and there are several variables you need to specify when you build a simple climate model. And this is just the simplest of climate models. Given some amount of imbalance in the radiation, the Earth, how much warming you see with time depends on the feedback. It depends on how deep into the ocean that heat gets mixed. Okay? Those are the two main things. There's about 4 different variables that control what the temperature will look like. Well, I took the simple model, and since it's very fast to run on a computer, I ran 100,000 simulations, giving all the different possible combinations of feedback, of how deep in the ocean the heat is being mixed, but also of how this is changing clouds. Now I'm just going to assume, for the model, I'm going to assume that this PDO index is also an index of cloud cover. Okay, so this is just an assumption to run the computer model. And there were many thousands of computer model simulations that came out that looked like the thermometer. So this is an average of all of them. If the computer gets to choose how much to change the clouds by with the PDO index, then you can come up with this for what might have caused the temperature changes in the 20th century. I also added in James Hansen's forcings, increasing carbon dioxide and aerosols and everything else, volcanoes. And if I put that in with the PDO, it looks like that, okay? Now, all I've done is played a computer game. The computer told me how much the PDO would have to change the clouds by in order to cause the temperature changes in the 20th century. Now we can go to our satellite data again. And this is about 6 years worth of data. This is how the PDO index varied during this satellite period of record since 2000. This is how this radiation imbalance of the Earth, the absorbed solar and emitted infrared, how that imbalance varied over time. It's in the right direction to cause warming and cooling. And if you plot yearly averages of the PDO index against this radiative imbalance of the Earth, imbalance between solar and infrared, that's what this is, which is probably being changed by clouds, natural cloud fluctuations. We see that there is a relationship between the PDO index and this radiative imbalance of the Earth. This is what this dashed line is what the model said would be the best relationship between PDO and clouds to explain temperature changes in the 20th century. And this is the average satellite observed relationship. Now, this is what the PDO index looked like over the last 100 years. I'm not necessarily saying this is the explanation for global warming. But it only took me a weekend, 2 days, on my home computer to come up with a possible natural explanation for global warming, while the IPCC is spending billions of dollars, hundreds of climate scientists, 24 climate models, assuming that the warming is man-made. I am the only one that is doing this kind of research that I know of, trying to figure out potential natural mechanisms, in this case just internal fluctuations in the climate system is what I think this is. It's just chaos. There's chaos in the climate system on all time scales. We usually think of chaos as being with weather, but there's no reason why chaos can't exist on all time scales, especially since the ocean has such a long time scale. It can take centuries. The ocean has a memory of centuries of past climate conditions. And what's interesting is that all of our satellite data where we've tried to see what the average climate state is, all of our satellite data have been during the positive phase of the PDO, which probably means during our satellite era, we have a biased view of what average climate looks like. And as some of you know, it looks like we might be going in to the negative phase of the PDO again with a colder Arctic, colder and snowier weather over northern hemisphere land areas in the winter. I'm not going to predict that it keeps doing this. I know that, I think it's Don Easterbrook is predicting cooling for the next 30 years. I stay away from predicting climate. Arctic sea ice coverage. This is one of the plots that I updated this morning, but I apparently lost the file. So anyway, Arctic sea ice, this was the minimum, late summer minimum in Arctic sea ice in 2007. Then it recovered a little bit in 2008. Here we are in 2009, and I updated this to yesterday, and it's about in here. It's still above the other years. So what will happen this winter? Who knows? But maybe Arctic sea ice is now recovering because of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation and the changes it has brought to the Arctic. Now, one of the claims is that we skeptics don't publish our results. Well, we do publish, but nobody pays attention. For instance, we have this paper that we published in 2007 that showed negative feedback in the tropics. I get called by reporters all the time, asking my opinion about other papers, global warming papers that appear in journals like Science and Nature and Journal of Climate, Journal of Geophysical Research. The reporters ask me what I think of the papers. When we published this paper, we put out a university press release. I had 0 calls from reporters, none. 1 year later, we showed theoretically that this cause versus effect between temperature and clouds could mean that we have misinterpreted feedback in the climate system. We put out a press release from the university for this paper. I had 0 calls from reporters. And then we're not the only ones. Here's a paper published in 2007 where they looked at how temperature over land varies with economic activity and found that as much as 50% of the warming we think we've measured over land could be just the urban heat island bias that has not been removed from the data. Not a good enough job of removing the urban heat island bias. Oh, they put out a press release. They had 0 calls from the media. The extra CO2 we're putting into the atmosphere is causing some warming. It seems to me that it would have to be causing some warming. So we'll probably have a human addition on top of natural variability. But how much compared to natural variability? I don't know, maybe very small. Satellite data reveal the climate system is relatively insensitive. That means negative feedback, same thing,